Welcome back to the show, everyone. Craig and Jonah here. Not sure when you're going to see this episode. We're recording this. We got about 30 minutes before we get Annulment John on the thing. And in case that thing derails or just gets so long, this one may have to come out first. But so Jonah had a story
Yeah,
from his
just
recent
I've been
travels.
traveling and it's in the airport waiting there, and all of a sudden a female worker for the airline, she was yelling to somebody else like across the room, and it was kind of loud. So she was yelling pretty loud, and the guy next to me says, if only she was swearing, it'd remind me of home. And and then he said basically he was joking about how if his wife was yelling like that, she'd be telling him that, what he caused whatever, led her to yell like that. And he said he just jumps whenever he hears a woman yell like that due to years of negative conditioning. And so then I was like, so it sounds kind of like Pavlov's dog, And he's like, yeah, you got the dog part right. And you just think about that, and I'm sure that she yells at him about, their problems in their relationship, but there's probably a lot of it that comes back to her yelling like that. I mean, nobody likes to be talked to like that. So the guy was probably, close to 60 years old, and he's been married for a long time. But
Well, I'm
man,
glad I can't relate to any of that. So
oh man, like I don't know. That's some painful stuff, and you just feel bad for people that live like that. But I don't know. I didn't have much, advice to give him or anything like that in the airport, but it
there's a lot of hurting people out there. And what's so sad, so this is a good segue to the Five Love Languages book.
yeah.
Uh,
And hers was yelling. Just kidding.
well, the story talks about a lot of couples that are kind of in that type of conflict, and it has nothing to do with the fact that they've fallen out of love for each other. They just don't understand how to love and communicate with each other. So he was,
Hmm.
so a lot of times, like,
And I think a lot of people get to that stage.
well, in this is something I had never really thought about, but his big thing is that people have this falling in love or in love, kind of that initial infatuation, that kind of that exhilarating thing that we all experience when he said that lasts about 2 years. And then it's almost universally predictable that people fall out of that phase after about 2 years, and then real life sets in.
Hmm.
And unless you're prepared to deal with that, because he said basically the emotions of that process just propel you, just keep your relationship going. You see all the positives, you feel loved all the time. And then when that tapers off, unless you're prepared to like purposely love your spouse in the way that they receive love, you can have conflict, and people can very much love each other and feel completely lost in how to do that,
Hmm.
how to show that.
Yeah.
And I say in my own personal experience, I didn't realize until a couple years ago that all the sort of my the way I tried to show love to my wife was often acts of service, doing things for her, helping the
Hmm.
family. And that's not her love language, and it drove her crazy because her love language is quality time.
Hmm. Yep.
When I'm out,
Mine too, actually. And I
yeah,
and I didn't know that till recently we were
yeah.
talking about it.
So when I'm out doing things for her, I'm not spending time with her. I'm not spending
Hmm.
time with her. So it
That's
didn't,
that's actually the same thing that happened for us too.
yeah,
Like,
like, yeah. So not only like am I not feeding her love language, she sees me doing these things as hurtful to her. Like it's a double whammy,
yep.
right? The other big
Like you'd
mis
rather do that stuff than hang out with her is how she sees it. At least
Yes,
at some part of her brain, she thinks that.
exactly. And I'm really pissed off that I didn't figure that. No one
Yeah.
told me that until I just kind of stumbled upon it somehow.
And that happened to actually, so Dolores got the Five Love Languages book, like, and this was when things weren't going the greatest for us or whatever. And she told me to read it, and she thought that I should just know what hers was. And I did not know it was that
You figured it out.
we figured it out later, yeah.
Did she figure out what yours is?
Um, she never said either way, but I mean, I'm pretty easygoing. I don't know. There's
Well, this is a nice segue to So, and just recently, our favorite Catholic ladies, their podcast, were talking about they were rebutting this idea that sex can be a person's love language, or especially a man's love language, and that's kind of goes along with the idea whether sex is a need for men.
Mm-hmm. Do you still listen to them?
Occasionally, I kind of search the title. This one caught my attention. They've been getting shorter, so if they're like 12 or 15 minutes, I
You
can
can bear
more
that.
easily, yeah. Which is probably why people don't watch this show. It's damn long. So, but you know, he talks about how physical touch, people have a love language and a dialect, right? A preferred. So
I didn't
you're
make it that far in the book. I read the five love
you got to
languages.
read it. I'm
Okay.
doing the audiobook, and I had my wife order the book. I don't think she understands my love language.
Hmm.
Um,
So, spoiler alert, what is your love language?
well, see, this is where it's complicated because I know she thinks that my love language is physical touch.
Sure. But it's not just that. And I understand where you're going with this, I think.
And it may very well be.
It's a component.
I think it's a component, but I think men have this need for sex that mm, that may or may not be their love language. And when you're I find when I'm sort of anxious about all that, it makes it hard to be happy anyway.
Yeah.
But I think physical touch is one of my love languages. And I was thinking back because he said one of the things he says in his book is look back to kind of when you're in that 2 year period, everything was blissful. The one thing that my wife and I did all the time, this obviously before we had kids and were married, but we would go for long walks, hold hands, and talk.
Yeah.
So that was her quality time, and I loved holding her hand and just being close to her. Um, and so I think physical touch is part of my love language, but I think acts of, or I'm sorry, like words of affirmation and support are
Yeah.
probably my other love language.
I think that comes along with maybe respect or like
Yeah,
like just the support and
yeah,
affection. I mean,
yeah,
I think, for me personally, I think those things are very important as well.
yeah. And the way I've figured it out is trying to identify um kind of because he said you can help you can help know when your love language is when you find the things that particularly hurt you when things happen, like certain things bother you more than
Hmm.
others, and negative feedback really bothers me, like if she makes a comment, oh,
Oh,
you're
same
bad
with
with the
me too.
kids or whatever.
Yep. Yep.
And so
Not that
what
she says that.
not that she's it's been suggested in very direct words at times, and
No,
it really hurts me.
same with me too. Like it cuts like a knife.
Yeah.
Deep.
And there's the perception sometimes is that not only do I not get positive feedback, the only feedback I get is negative, and it really cuts me deep. Like,
Yeah.
and
That
that's
that
maybe
that
just
that,
my
that yeah.
perception. So I'm convinced that that is my love language. I don't know. I don't think she understands that. We'll see. We'll see if she reads the book and if she comes to any, um, you know, conclusions about that. But you know, one of the things that got me thinking about this, because he kind of alludes to this, and maybe another episode I'll actually play a clip from the audio book because it's really good. But if a spouse's love language is physical touch and their dialect, a particular way that they like to enjoy physical touch, let's say is sex. Abstinence in NFP I wonder if that doesn't explain why some people have a harder time with abstinence than others.
Sure.
If your physical touch is not your love language, eh, going a couple of weeks without intimacy of any sort may be a different thing for you. I think you still have that underlying biological reality,
Hmm.
but uh, for me, I have this. I've just so the other night, we were in our little 5 or 6 day window,
Yeah.
maybe the one chance a month,
Yeah. The one chance a month club.
one chance a month club. I think we had, so this is day 4. So we had potential, we had a backup, but we're
Yeah.
kind of moving in that. Take the child, lay the child down, the child wakes up. And that's the end of it. And I sat there and I was frustrated. And she got mad because she thought I was mad at her, which I wasn't. I was just like, but I realized that, you know, I personally have a lot of anxiety about sexual intimacy because it is something that's really important to me. PMS is PMAS is an issue, and I don't want to engaging in these other sins.
Hmm.
What's really hard is it's important to me, but it's really outside my control. Number one, NFP cycle,
Hmm.
fertility is outside my control, and number two, the kids are outside my control.
Hmm.
The kids wake up, and
Yep.
three, obviously my wife's interest and willingness to do that, but there's really three key parts of that.
And the tension that builds.
Yeah, yeah, like I just realized that I have this deep-seated anxiety over it because I'm always thinking something's gonna happen, like something's gonna fall apart.
Yeah.
And I don't know if
It's
I'm
kind of like a
alone or
deck of
not.
cards,
Yeah,
a
yeah,
house of cards.
yeah. I'm just waiting for it to fall apart.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that is a I don't know what to do about that, but it really struck me as I was reading this book because I suspect it's a common problem for a lot of men,
Hmm.
and wives may not necessarily relate to that or understand that, but I think it's part of the whole dynamic about NFP and abstinence and all this and that
Hmm.
uh, to me at least, is another question mark on the idea that you just gotta abstain or
Hmm.
continuously abstain if you're the Johns of the world.
Yeah.
There's a there if that's the rule, there are just enormous
Well,
consequences
it's
to that.
damaging to your
It
relationship.
is
It's
damaging.
damaging.
It's not just
It's not
concupiscence.
just
It's
concupiscence. It's
not just
damaging.
concupiscence.
Like the connection that is supposed to be produced through intimacy, that when that doesn't happen, it causes problems.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yep.
nobody wants to be married to a roommate.
Right. That's not natural.
And I don't think even the people that it isn't their love language, they don't want to be married to a roommate either.
Right. Right. And so, you know, I just wonder, like, I don't even know that this is because like the Five Love Languages book came out, I think in the 80s or 90s. It was after John Paul II wrote Love and
Hmm?
Responsibility and some of the like it just feels like, you get more of these pieces. Like this is important information. Let's factor this in.
Hmm.
I I like to think that we didn't stop learning about things in 1930 with Casti Connubii.
Yeah, it's almost been 100 years ago. Things have changed a fair amount since
A little
then.
bit, yeah.
You know, less horses are being used for transportation.
Yeah. Well,
Got a microwave now, television.
right.
There's a lot of things that have changed.
Podcasting was a little more rudimentary back then.
Yeah.
Tap 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 tap
Yeah.
tap 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 tap. But
Yeah.
it's that tension between, um, tradition and not, like the value of tradition, and we want to maintain things, but also making room for growth in our appreciation, and that's always the tension. And there's
Hmm.
I get why traditionalists, so for example, are very resistant to anything that looks like it's a change,
Hmm.
because that sounds like, um, y you
They
know
call it like what you're becoming modern or whatever. Like
Yeah,
they, you're a heretic or
yeah,
a modern heretic,
yeah.
basically.
I and I used to feel that way, but I really think you look at how look at how Humani Vitae, compare that to how they wrote about this stuff back in the 300s and 400s. Like
Hmm.
we should be developing. We
Hmm.
should be learning new things and incorporating it and not be afraid.
And that is like the trad argument is that we've already solved all these things and we're done. So don't even think about it.
Yeah,
And I mean, that is a very real argument on Twitter.
yeah, yeah. So,
Like that we know more than the saints,
mhm.
and in some ways we do. Like we literally know more than the saints at that time. Like we know more about the science of reproduction than Thomas Aquinas did. I
Yeah.
mean, we do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we are not that much different from the saints. I mean, they were still sinners and had failings and stuff. We have access to a lot more information than
Hmm.
they did.
And they were just regular people as
They're
well.
just regular. I think there's this tendency to
Idolize them.
idolize.
Not to sound like a Protestant, but yeah,
Yeah. It,
they're
it,
put on a pedestal and they're
yeah.
untouchable.
Yeah. You start to like forget about all the rough edges they had, and all you see is this pristine
Hmm.
person. And I think that's a real problem.
And getting back to the intimacy thing, like if your marriage is without intimacy, there's no way it's thriving. You're probably just barely functioning as a couple.
Yeah, I mean, it is a crucifixion, and I know that the trads are always quick to jump on, yeah, that's the life of a Christian.
And that's fine if you don't
Maybe
have kids. You can crucify yourself all you want, but for your kids to live through that, I don't think that's right.
I don't think they appreciate the harm or impact that an unhappy relationship
An unaffectionate set of
has on
parents.
children, right?
Yep.
That's one of the things that this guy talks about in his book, is a lot of people grow up showing love, modeling what they saw in the home. And like the one guy said, "Hey, my dad never did dishes, never changed a diaper. That's not my job." Like
Hmm.
he could not understand how that would be an act of love to his wife, right? So modeling is real, the good and the bad. And I think people, again, I think people idolize big families and how idealistic it is and stuff. I'm telling you, it's hard. Like, it's tough. There are sacrifices that kids make. We were kind of talking about this a little bit before we got on the show, like how children need to bond with
With
their
their parents.
parents.
There's a study discussing how it's important to play with your children, especially as a dad, when they're young, because children experience an oxytocin
Mhm.
release, which results in bonding with their parents. And if you don't play with them enough as a kid, by the time they're teenagers, they're not that connected to you. But it is difficult to do if you have a bunch of kids.
Yeah, and I think I had a very close relationship with my dad growing up, but I was basically one of two
Same with
kids
me.
until I was 15. I know my relationship with my older kids is not the same, is not what I would like it to be. And I don't think it's just that I'm a bad father. I think we always had a kid in diapers and a toddler around.
And so you can't go throw the football around or whatever, like that. I get that.
So I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think it just means that we need to be open to, like, incorporating a lot of information in, and just be more humble and patient with people
Hmm.
that may be struggling with adding another child into their house or whatever. May not be equipped to have
Hmm.
7 8 kids, whatever. And
Yeah,
just be okay with that. Like, they're not all just selfish people. Like, that's the
it's
problem.
true.
um
That's true. There's all sorts of circumstances that
mhm, yeah,
could limit how many kids you can have
yeah, I agree. So anyway,
reasonably. I mean, you can always have more kids, but can you raise them
yeah,
in a loving home?
yeah,
I mean, and that's for everybody to decide.
mm, yeah,
Unless, of course, you're going to use the John Farrell argument or whatever.
yeah. I mean, as a dad of 9, like, of course I would never give back any of my kids. But if I was suddenly transported into an alternate reality to start a new family, I don't think I'd be shooting for 9 kids.
Yeah.
Just it's a huge responsibility. and and
As
and
far
the
as your time and money.
and the
I
price,
mean,
yeah, and the sacrifice is not just borne by the parents. The sacrifice is not just borne by, although the sacrifice of the husband and wife is enormous,
hmm.
but it's not just borne by the husband and wife. And I think people just need to be, it should be okay to say that. Like, I think.
Yeah, people shouldn't be made to feel scrupulous
Mhm,
over this stuff because
yep.
everybody knows their limits to a certain degree, and deep down, I think people know whether they can have more kids
Hmm.
to some level or
Yep.
not.
Yep. totally agree.
So
So,
I don't know.
all right.
Well,
To that poor guy that was in the airport, if you're listening to this, hope you're doing well.
yeah, I hope. And my wife and I went through some rough patches as well, and it was only through communication that it got better.
Mhm.
And
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that's what it took.
Yep.
Real difficult conversations, but it's one of those things where you can either suffer through it for the next however many years you have together. You can get divorced, or you can discuss it. I mean, because those are your three options. It's either suffering, divorce, or discuss it right now.
Well, and I think in a particular way, and he talked about this a lot in his book, and I think it's true, because we're always like, well, how do I get my spouse to listen to this stuff? He talks about stories where, like, figure out what your spouse's love language is and just start doing it. And it has the ability to move mountains.
That's true. That's good
Like,
advice.
you
It's
can't.
difficult. Like it would be difficult though for me to know that my wife wants me to sit with her.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's
The
just
clues are
difficult to
there.
know that. I mean, the clues were there looking
Yeah.
back on it.
Yeah.
But
The
it didn't make sense to me that that's what you wanted me to do.
Yeah. That's why I wish.
Especially if she's not in a great mood. That
Yeah.
I'm supposed to assume she wants me to sit by her.
Yeah.
That's difficult to really reconcile.
Mm-hmm. Well, and she's probably mad because you haven't been sitting by her. So
It just builds, but you don't want to
Yeah.
sit by somebody that's ornery either.
Yeah. If I could give one piece of advice to anyone, it would be to read that book early as you can. Like, read it
And talk about it.
It's talk about it. And if your spouse is completely resist to it, just do it. Just do what's their love language.
And you can even just try a love language for a while and see if it's their love
Yep.
language.
Oh, that wasn't it. I put the moves on every night.
A damn thing. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right.
That is good advice.
All right. Maybe I'll put a link to that below to that book if people want to check it out. So,
sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you, Jonah. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
You bet.
And until next time, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good one.